I hadn't seen my mother in 18 years until she walked into the boardroom and asked where the money was. Then the lawyer opened a red wax envelope meant for her, and her smile disappeared. The first thing I noticed was her coat. Cream-colored cashmere draped over her shoulders with the casual arrogance of a woman who has never once had to check a price tag. She was already seated when I walked into the conference room. She had made sure of that. Made sure I'd have to enter her room, cross her floor, sit down while she watched from the high-backed leather chair like she'd already won. She looked up. Our eyes met. 18 years. And the first thing she did was smile. Not the guilty, flinching smile of someone who knows they abandoned their 16-year-old kid with a half-empty jar of pickles and 3 months of unpaid rent. Not a real smile at all. It was the practiced expression of a woman who had already spent the inheritance in her head on the drive over. "Morgan, sweetheart," she said. Her voice was exactly as I remembered it. Melodic, warm, and hollow as a stage prop. "It has been too long, sweetheart." The same word she used the night before she packed her bags and disappeared. The same word she used when she promised to show up to my school play and didn't. The same word she used for every lie she ever told me, slicked over with that voice like honey poured over rot. I pulled out a chair on the opposite side of the table and sat down. I did not hug her. I did not acknowledge the word. I folded my hands on the mahogany surface and looked past her to where Marvin Clean was arranging his documents at the head of the table. Marvin was my uncle's personal attorney. 70 years old, built like a retired offensive lineman, with eyes that cataloged everything and forgot nothing. He placed a digital recorder in the center of the table and pressed a button. A tiny red light blinked on. "This reading is now in session," Marvin said. "These proceedings are being recorded. The contents of the last will and testament of Elliot Sawyer are legally sealed until the conclusion of this meeting. Any interruption will result in immediate removal from the premises." Beside my mother sat a man named Grant Weller, her boyfriend, or maybe her husband by now. I hadn't kept track. He was in his 50s, trying hard to look 40, wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny and a watch that was slightly too large. He had the confident, preemptive smirk of a man who thought he'd already negotiated his way out of a bad situation before it started. He reached into a leather briefcase and slid a thick blue folder across the table toward Marvin. "To save everyone time," he said, his voice smooth and proprietary. "Paula and I had our legal team draw up a preliminary family settlement. We're willing to be generous with Morgan, of course, a flat payout, and Paula will step in to manage the administrative burden of the company. Keep the legacy in family hands." I almost laughed. The idea of my mother running a defense contractor was genuinely funny. She couldn't manage a checking account. Marvin did not touch the folder, did not look at it. He simply set it aside like it was a takeout menu no one had ordered from and began reading the asset inventory. The list was long. The estate on the cliffs of Ravenport, $8 million. A portfolio of encryption patents generating mid-six figures annually. Investment accounts, bonded trusts, offshore holdings, and then the crown jewel. 76% controlling interest in Black Harbor Defense Group, Marvin read, a private cybersecurity and intelligence firm. Estimated valuation at current market rates exceeds $40 million. Grant licked his lips. Literally licked them, like a dog who just heard the refrigerator open. My mother's chin lifted slightly. She exhaled a small, satisfied breath through her nose. That was when Marvin stopped reading. The silence stretched. 4 seconds, 8 seconds, long enough to become physically uncomfortable. Then Marvin reached into his briefcase and produced a second envelope. It was not standard legal correspondence. It was heavy cream stock, sealed with red wax, and on the front, in my uncle's aggressive block letter typeface, were the words, "Conditional addendum. Read only if Paula Sawyer appears." The atmosphere in the room changed like a pressure drop before a storm. My mother's hand, which had been reaching for her water glass, stopped in midair. For half a second, just half, the mask slipped. I saw it. The recognition, the calculation, and under both of those, something rarer, fear. She recovered fast. She let out a brittle laugh. "Oh, Elliot," she said, shaking her head. "Even from the grave. What is this? Some kind of joke?" Marvin placed his hand flat on the envelope. "Your brother anticipated today," he said quietly. "He planned for it in specific detail. He instructed me that this envelope was only to be produced if you physically attended the reading. If you had stayed away, if you had simply allowed your son to grieve, this document would have remained sealed forever." My mother's smile faltered again. She looked at the envelope, then she looked at me, and then she did something I did not expect. She reached under the table and grabbed my hand. Her palm was cold, clammy. She locked her fingers around mine like a vice. "Morgan," she whispered, dropping her voice into a conspiratorial register. "Don't let them do this. Your uncle he was a difficult man. He held grudges his whole life. We are the only family left. Whatever is in that envelope, we can ignore it. We can make our own deal." I looked down at our joined hands. Her knuckles were white. She wasn't holding my hand out of love. She was holding it the way someone grabs a railing when the floor gives way. I was her human shield, her last piece of leverage, and she genuinely believed, that 18 years of silence could be erased with one cold-handed squeeze. I slowly, deliberately pulled my hand free. "Let him read it," I said. "To understand what happened next, you have to understand where I came from. I was 16 years old the night my mother left. I'd worked worked a 6-hour dinner shift at a diner on Route 9, the kind of place where the grease soaks through your uniform by hour 2 and the tips come in crumpled singles. I came home to an apartment that was completely silent. My mother hated silence. She filled every room with noise. Reality TV at maximum volume, phone calls on speaker, the constant low-grade drama of a woman who manufactured crises to feel alive. But that night, the television was dark. The air smelled stale. I went to her bedroom. The closet door was open. Where her clothes had been, there was only a row of wire hangers swinging softly in the draft. On the kitchen counter, held down by a salt shaker, was a note written on the back of an overdue electric bill. I cannot do this anymore. I need to breathe. You are 16. You will be fine. Don't look for me. I stood there a long time staring at those words. I didn't cry. Crying would have implied surprise. And deep down, under all the denial I'd spent years building, I wasn't surprised at all. I was just exhausted. For 3 days, I lived in suspended animation. I went to school because it was warm and they served free breakfast. I went to my shift at the diner because I needed money for food. I called her number so many times I had the automated voicemail memorized by inflection. The cycle broke on Friday when the landlord pounded on the door. He told me the rent was 2 months late. He told me he was calling the sheriff. He told me if she was gone, he was calling child services. He slammed the door. The denial shattered. I was 16. I had $12.40. I had no food, no heat past the end of the week, and a mother who had apparently been lying about paying rent for 2 months while watching me work extra shifts to cover groceries. I spent that night packing. The next morning, I walked into the guidance counselor's office and said 3 words. My mom left. The machinery of the system ground into motion. Phone calls, forms. A social worker named Mrs. Gable with a clipboard and tired eyes. They asked if I had other family. I gave them the only name I knew, Elliot Sawyer. My mother rarely mentioned her brother. When she did, it was with venom. She called him cold, a control freak, a man who loved spreadsheets more than people. I hadn't seen him since I was 5 years old. I didn't know his address. I didn't know his phone number. I only knew that he was somewhere in Massachusetts and that he'd built something significant. I sat in the main office for 4 hours. I prepared myself for the news that he didn't want me. Then the double doors swung open. Elliot Sawyer did not look like a savior. He looked like a man who had been interrupted mid-merger. Tall, precise, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like he'd been assembled in it. He walked in with a stride that made every other person in the room sit up straighter without knowing why. He ignored the social workers. He looked directly at me. His eyes were gray, the color of cold steel, and they took inventory of everything in under 3 seconds. The worn sneakers, the frayed jeans, the hollow under my eyes. He turned to Mrs. Gable. Is the paperwork ready? He signed without sitting down. He didn't ask about my mother. He didn't ask why she left. He treated the situation like a logistical error that needed correction. When he was done, he turned to me and pointed at my backpack. Is that everything? Yes. Then we leave now. I followed him out to a black sedan that shone like it had been polished that morning. I threw my backpack in the trunk. It looked pathetic in the vast carpeted space. In the car, he didn't turn on the radio. He drove both hands on the wheel, eyes forward for 10 full minutes. Then he spoke. I know what she told you about me, he said. He didn't look at me. She told you I was cold, that I didn't care. I said nothing. She was right about the cold part, he continued. I'm not going to be a father to you, Morgan. I don't know how to do that. I'm not going to be your friend. I felt the familiar weight of rejection settling over my shoulders like a coat I'd worn since childhood. But then he said, I am dependable. You'll have a roof, food, an education, and you will never have to wonder if the lights will come on when you flip the switch. He stopped at a red light and finally looked at me. His expression was sharp and angry, but not at me, at the universe, at the specific chaos that had allowed a 16-year-old boy to be thrown away like trash. You won't beg for stability again, he said. The light turned green. He accelerated. I pressed my forehead against the cool passenger window and watched the highway markers blur past. I should have felt relieved. I had been rescued. I was safe, but I was more terrified than I had been in the empty apartment because I could already feel myself wanting to trust it, and I knew exactly how much it would cost me when it broke. Living in Elliot Sawyer's house was like living inside a Swiss watch. Everything was calibrated, silent, and operating on a logic I didn't understand yet. His estate in Ravenport was glass and steel and dark wood perched on a cliff over the Atlantic, and inside it there was no dust, no clutter, no shoes left in the hallway. The air was maintained at a constant 68 degrees. On my second morning, I found a single sheet of bond paper on the kitchen island with my name printed at the top. It was a schedule, not a chore list, not house rules, a schedule. Wake up time, meals, school hours, physical activity, and 1 hour every afternoon labeled skill acquisition. I crumpled it and threw it away. When Elliot came home that evening to find me watching television with my feet on his coffee table, he didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He simply walked over, turned off the television, and said, dinner was at 6:30. The kitchen is now closed. Then he poured himself a glass of water and went to his study. I sat in the dark, stunned. He wasn't going to fight me. He was just going to let the system run. I tested the perimeter every way I knew. I skipped the skill acquisition hour to listen to music. The next day, the Wi-Fi password had been changed. I asked for the new one, and he handed me a textbook on network security. Crack it, he said. said. The hint is in chapter 3. It took me 4 hours, but when I typed in the correct sequence and the connection icon lit up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Satisfaction. A specific, earned satisfaction that was completely unlike anything I'd felt before. I walked into his study. I got it, I said. He didn't look up from his laptop. Tomorrow, the encryption will be harder. He wasn't punishing me. He was training me. The skill acquisition hour became the center of my life. He taught me how to read a balance sheet, contract law basics, how to memorize logical fallacies so I could take apart an argument in real time. He took me to the Black Harbor offices and made me sit in the corner during negotiations. He'd let the other side talk themselves into exhaustion, and then he'd produce a single document, their own earnings report, a shipping manifest, a leaked internal memo, and dismantle everything they'd said in 30 seconds flat. How did you know he was lying before you even showed the paper? I asked him once on the drive home. He kept his eyes on the road. Truth gets irritated when it's accused. Lies get careful. That man was protecting a narrative. Truth doesn't need protection. I thought about my mother then, about how careful she always was when she promised to pay the rent, how elaborate her explanations always were for every lost job. She wasn't unlucky. She was architectural. She built her disasters on purpose and then asked the people around her to help her carry them. I started to see the difference. The transfer of power happened slowly, then all at once. By my mid-20s, I was a junior analyst at Black Harbor. No nepotism, no special treatment. Elliot had made the terms explicit. I would start at the bottom of the compliance department. I would report to a middle manager who was twice as hard on me specifically to prove he wasn't playing favorites. I learned the business not by leading it, but by dissecting it. 2 years in the connective tissue of the company, government contracts, liability clauses, risk architecture. I learned that Black Harbor didn't sell weapons. We sold fortresses, digital ones. We protected the secrets of banks and healthcare systems and defense agencies, and we sold peace of mind to people with very expensive things to hide. Then the cancer came. Elliot told me on a quiet evening in early spring. He was sitting at his desk looking at a blank monitor, one hand resting on his stomach. When I said his name, he flinched, and in that flinch, I saw something I had never seen in 10 years. He was in pain. There's a timeline, he said. What kind? Pancreatic. A pause. 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm stubborn. The room tilted. I gripped the back of a chair. We get you to a specialist, I said immediately, my mind already scanning through connections, clinics, experimental trials in Zurich. We have the resources. We fight this. Morgan, he said, quiet, final. I'm not spending my last months vomiting in a Swiss clinic. I have work to do. I have an estate to secure. I have a company to protect. He looked at me directly. And I have you. You're not ready yet. You're competent, but you're not fortified. We have 6 months to finish your training. He turned back to his monitor and woke the screen. Pull up the trust fund distribution charts, he said. We need to restructure the voting rights tonight. I stood there a moment. I could feel the grief waiting in the wings, a tidal wave being held back by a thin pane of glass. I swallowed it. I locked it in a box in my chest, the way he had taught me to, the way he locked every inconvenient feeling behind a wall of methodology. I pulled up a chair. Which file? I asked, and we went to work. The final months were the most intensive of my life. The dining room table became a staging ground. Marvin moved into the guest house. A forensic accountant named Chen and an estate specialist named Dr. Rourke joined the team. Elliot called it redundancy engineering, building backup systems robust enough to run without him. He'd sit in his armchair wrapped in a wool blanket, his skin papery and translucent, and drill scenarios at me. Minority shareholder files no confidence. Your move. Press release confirming the succession plan was filed 2 years ago. I call the 3 largest institutional investors directly. I threaten to dilute the minority stake in the next capital raise if operations are disrupted. Tabloid claims you manipulated a dying man. Release the video affidavit from his physicians confirming mental competency. File defamation within the hour. No press comment. He drilled me until the answers were automatic. He was programming muscle memory. He wanted to ensure that when the grief finally broke through, the company would keep running, even while I was falling apart. The hardest session came late on a Tuesday evening with rain lashing the windows. He opened a black binder on his lap. We've prepared for business enemies, he said, his voice thin. Now we prepare for the personal ones. He slid the binder across to me. Inside were emails, dozens of them, dated. The first one 3 weeks after she left me. Elliot, I know you have him. If you want to keep playing hero, it's going to cost you. I need $10,000 wired to this account by Friday. I felt nausea roll through me like a wave. She hadn't been missing. She knew exactly where I was. She'd used my abandonment as leverage. She'd tried to turn my uncle's decency into a subscription service. 6 months later, he's turning 18 soon. If you don't want me showing up at his graduation and making a scene, I need a car. Years of them. Threats, guilt trips, demands with deadlines. She had tried to monetize the fact that she'd thrown me away. Did you pay her? I asked. My voice came out steady. I was proud of that. Not 1 cent, he said. If you pay a blackmailer once, you pay them forever. But I kept everything. Every email, every timestamp, every IP address. He pointed at the binder. That's not history, Morgan. That's ammunition. Then he described the Sawyer Foundation, a dormant charitable entity existing only on paper, holding no funds, with bylaws integrated directly into the estate plan. If the will is contested specifically by your mother, he said, leaning forward with the last concentrated intensity his body could produce, the assets don't freeze. They don't go to probate limbo. The entire estate liquidates. Every dollar converts to cash and transfers irrevocably to the foundation. I stared at him. You'd burn $40 million. She'll have a choice, he said. She can take the settlement and walk, or she can try to take everything and end up funding the one thing she refused to be. He settled back into his chair. A parent. He made me promise him one thing that night. The only time he ever asked for a vow rather than a signature. Don't chase revenge, Morgan, he said. His grip on my hand was frail, the bones close to the surface. Revenge is emotional. It requires you to get in the mud with them. Let the truth do the damage. You stay clean. You stay above it. The facts are heavier than any stone you can throw. He died 8 days later, quietly, on a Tuesday morning looking at the ocean. When the paramedics came, I stood in the doorway and watched them work with my back straight and my face dry. The grief was there, enormous, crushing, waiting like a held breath, but I pushed it behind the glass. I had calls to make, a press release to issue, and a mother to prepare for. Marvin broke the wax seal in the conference room with a sound like a bone snapping. Paula's face had already begun to lose its color before he finished the first paragraph. She knew. She recognized the typeface, the tone, the absolute architectural certainty of a man who played chess while everyone around him played checkers. She had been sitting across from a table full of money she'd already mentally deposited, and now she was watching the table tilt. Marvin read. The addendum confirmed what we already knew. Her presence at the reading was itself the trigger. The document outlined the state in which she had left me at 16. It detailed the fraudulent loan attempt 7 years ago. $22,000 borrowed in Elliot's name without his knowledge. A federal wire fraud charge he had quietly paid to Barry to protect the family name. He had kept the file. Her options were simple. Sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the abandonment and the fraud, accept a one-time settlement of $50,000 minus the $22,000 loan repayment, leaving her with $28,000, agree to a lifetime ban on contacting me or Black Harbor personnel, and walk, or fight, and watch every dollar vaporize. Grant stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. This is a bluff, he snarled. No one destroys $40 million to make a point. I looked at him. You didn't know my uncle, I said. My mother turned to me. The mask was completely gone now. What was underneath it wasn't grief or regret. It was raw, animal desperation. The expression of a creature that has just realized the cage door is closing. Morgan, her voice cracked. You can fix this. You're the heir. Tell them we'll make our own deal. Just us. Family. I leaned back in my chair. The leather was cool against my spine. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't the boy waiting on the curb. I don't negotiate with people who tried to sell me, I said, and then I waited for her to make her move. The fallout was not an explosion. It was a siege. First came the lawyer letters, politely worded extortion suggesting an amicable renegotiation of the estate, hinting that a public legal battle would be unfortunate for a defense contractor. I shredded them. Elliot had taught me that silence is the loudest answer to a threat. Then came the phone calls, blocked numbers, cycling through grief and manipulation and fury like a dial being turned. I archived every voicemail. Morgan, it's Mom. I just want to talk. I told Grant we can work this out. 2 hours later, you are just like him. Do you know what it feels like to be erased by your own family? By midnight, you think a piece of paper protects you? You're playing dress up in a dead man's suit. I saved every file to an encrypted server, backed up in 3 locations. They weren't hurting me anymore. They were building my case. Then Grant moved the battlefield into the company. I arrived Monday morning to find the head of client relations waiting at my desk, pale and sweating. 3 Tier 1 clients had received anonymous emails overnight, allegations of fraud, claims that Elliot had been coerced into the succession. Worse, allegations that Black Harbor was leaking data to foreign entities. In the defense industry, trust is the currency. One whisper of compromised integrity and contracts pause, audits trigger, the stock bleeds. We spent 6 hours in the server room stripping email headers down to raw metadata. The routing was complex. Estonia, Panama, a chain of proxies designed to look like state-level intrusion. But our security lead Marcus, formerly Naval Intelligence, found a recurring timing anomaly in the packet signatures. It pointed to a reputation management firm in a strip mall in New Jersey that specialized in scrubbing bad Yelp reviews and planting dirt on divorce targets. The payment had been made with prepaid Visa cards purchased at a grocery store in Ravenport. Grant Weller was trying to destroy a $40 million defense firm with a reloadable debit card. Pathetic, but still dangerous. I need a smoking gun, I told Marcus. Something that proves active intrusion attempt, not just external harassment. Marcus looked at me. Canary trap? Said it. We built a fake document, a PDF stamped confidential and draft, titled Executive Compensation Restructuring and Emergency Settlement Fund. The content was complete fiction, a detailed plan for me to liquidate $5 million in assets to create a secret family payoff fund. It was exactly what they were praying to find. Confirmation that I was scared, that I was preparing to fold, embedded in the white space, invisible to the human eye, a pixel beacon. In the metadata, a canary token that would record the IP address, device type, and geolocation of anyone who opened it. We placed the document on a staging server with a deliberately weak password, one we'd already seen their hired proxies pinging. We left the back door unlocked. We put the cheese on the floor. It took 11 hours. My phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. Alert. Canary token triggered. The access IP was residential, registered to a townhouse in Ravenport. The device, a MacBook Pro. The user account, Grant Weller. He hadn't just hired a firm. He'd gotten greedy. He'd used the credentials to look for the payload himself, wanted to see the money with his own eyes. By 8 the next morning, a screenshot of the fake document had appeared on an industry gossip blog. They had taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. I walked into the legal department and told our general counsel to draft the motion. Harassment, I said. Defamation. Violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Unauthorized access to proprietary data. We go today. We went to court that afternoon. Judge Holloway, stern, efficient, allergic to drama, looked at the forensic report, the voicemail transcripts, the tracking logs. This isn't a dispute, she said, looking over her glasses. This is a siege. She granted the protective order immediately. 500 yards from my home, my office, and all Black Harbor affiliates. No contact, no online posts. Violation meant arrest. I had the order served within the hour. I should have known it wouldn't be enough. My mother didn't see a legal boundary. She saw a dare. The breach came on a Tuesday afternoon, under cover of a catering delivery. I was in my home office reviewing quarterly projections when the gate camera chimed. A legitimate catering truck I'd ordered for a strategy meeting rolled through the main gate, but as the iron bars began to close, a gray sedan surged from the blind spot of the hedge, gunned the engine, slipped the nose through the gap before the magnetic locks could engage. The safety sensors reversed the gate. The sedan shot up the driveway, Grant driving. My mother in the passenger seat, checking her reflection in the visor mirror, applying lipstick like she was arriving for brunch. I did not panic. I picked up my phone and dialed the private line of the Ravenport chief of police, a man who had known my uncle for 30 years. They're on the property, I said. Execute the response protocol. I walked out onto the front porch with my tablet in hand as the sedan crunched to a stop on the gravel below me. My mother stepped out with her arms open. "Morgan," she called, her voice pitched into that warm theatrical register that had fooled me until I was old enough to hear the machinery underneath it. "We need to stop this silliness. We're here to bring you home." I stood at the top of the stone steps without moving. "You're in violation of a court order," I said. She laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "You can't have a restraining order against your own mother. We're family. We're going to come inside and fix this mess Elliot left." I held up the tablet and turned the screen toward her. She could see herself on it, high definition, a running timestamp, a red label reading recording. Beside the video feed, a GPS map with her position plotted inside the red exclusion zone. "Everything you say and do is being live streamed to an off-site server," I said. "It's also mirrored to the Ravenport Police Department dispatch console." She stopped walking. The smile flickered. Grant charged forward. "Turn that off. You don't have my consent to film me. You're committing felony trespass and violating a protective order on private property," I said. "You have no expectation of privacy here." Then the sirens. 2 cruisers tore up the driveway, lights strobing against the pale afternoon sky. 4 officers stepped out. Sergeant Dale Miller, 22 years on the force, unflappable, utterly indifferent to crying women in cashmere, pulled a folded copy of the protective order from his chest pocket. "Ma'am, turn around. Hands behind your back." What followed was not dignified. Grant tried to use his size to intimidate a cop and ended up face down on the hood of his own car. My mother screamed, threatened to sue the department, invoked her late brother's name, wept without tears, and finally crumpled into performative devastation as the handcuffs clicked shut. I stood on the porch and watched. I felt no triumph, no joy, just the quiet, exhausted relief of a demolition crew finally taking down a condemned building. The mugshots were online within 2 hours. Her narrative machine tried to spin it: the grieving sister, the erased mother, the powerful boy who'd weaponized his dead uncle's money against his own family. Comments poured in. People who didn't know us took her side immediately because a crying woman in handcuffs is always more sympathetic than a man in a suit. I called Marvin. "Release the receipts," I said. "The police report from the night I was abandoned. The guardianship transfer. That's all. Surgical." The next morning, the local paper ran both documents on the front page. No editorializing needed. The bureaucratic language was devastating on its own. Subject found alone in apartment. No food. Utilities scheduled for disconnect. Mother's whereabouts unknown. Then the guardianship paper. I, Paula Sawyer, relinquish all rights. The public sympathy evaporated in an afternoon. She wasn't a victim. She was a record. She filed the contest 2 weeks later. Marvin called me on a Tuesday evening. "She filed," he said, "formal contest in probate court. She's claiming the poison pill is unenforceable. She thinks you'll blink." I sat in my office looking at the skyline for a long moment. She was betting everything on the assumption that I loved money more than I hated betrayal. She was projecting her own arithmetic onto me, the cold, transactional math of a woman who had priced everything, including her own child. She couldn't conceive of of someone choosing principle over profit. She expects me to call her, I said. She expects me to offer her $5 million to drop it. She does, Marvin said. Prepare the defense, I said. We enforce the clause. Full stop. The probate courtroom smelled of floor wax and old paper. I sat beside Marvin at the defendant's table in my best suit. Across the aisle, my mother sat with a court-appointed attorney, having burned through her retainer months ago. She held a handkerchief she dabbed at her eyes whenever Judge Holloway looked her direction. She still believed she was going to win. That confidence was almost admirable in its wrongness. Marvin presented the timeline without emotion or theater, just documents, the police report, the guardianship transfer, the emails, years of them, demanding payments in exchange for staying away from me, the forensic report linking Grant's laptop to the stolen canary document, the voicemail recordings, the GPS logs from the gate camera. Her attorney argued undue influence, a confused, isolated old man, a calculating nephew who'd whispered poison in his ear. Judge Holloway let him finish. Then she looked at the file. Then she looked at my mother. Ms. Sawyer, the judge said, her voice quiet and lethal. In 20 years on this bench, I have rarely seen a plaintiff arrive with hands this unclean. My mother started to speak. Your brother knew who you were, the judge continued. He anticipated your greed with such precision that he built a legal mechanism specifically designed to make fighting him more expensive than surrendering to him. You had a choice. You could have taken the settlement. Instead, you filed. You pulled the trigger yourself. The gavel came down. Hard. It sounded like a door slamming shut on a room I'd been trapped in since I was 16 years old. The will is valid. The contest triggers Article 6. The estate of Elliot Sawyer is to be immediately liquidated and transferred irrevocably to the Sawyer Foundation for Homeless Youth. The plaintiff receives nothing. Case dismissed. My mother stood up. Her chair scraped back. She looked at the table, at the lawyer, at the walls of the courtroom. Then she looked at me. And the last of it, the performance, the calculation, the constructed identity of the wronged mother, dissolved completely. What was left underneath was small and hollow and genuinely shocked. You stupid boy, she whispered. You let him burn it. You have nothing now. I picked up my briefcase. I have a job, I said. I have a home I bought with my own salary. And I have 18 years of evidence that the only person who ever tried to take things from me was you. I walked out. Her voice followed me into the hallway, and then it didn't. I drove back to the estate alone. The staff had left for the day. Just me and the ocean and the empty rooms and the weight of everything that had just ended. I sat in Elliot's chair. It still felt slightly too large for me, but less than it used to. I took the flash drive from the safe, the one labeled in his angular handwriting, play only after the reading. Elliot's face filled the screen. He looked sick, the cancer visible now in every line of his face, the suit hanging a little loose, but his eyes were completely clear. He was sitting in this chair, in this room, looking directly into the lens, like he was looking directly at me. Morgan, he said, if you're watching this, she filed, which means she made her choice. He paused. Don't mourn the money. Money is fuel. Sitting in a tank, it's inert. When it burns, it moves things. He leaned into the camera. I didn't leave you the inheritance to make you safe. Safety is an illusion. I left you the system so you'd never be cornered again. You're the CEO of Black Harbor, not because you own shares, but because the board knows you're the only one who can run it. You earned that. Nobody gave it to you. A slow exhale. Take the foundation. Take that money and make sure that no 16-year-old kid ever has to sit on a curb waiting for a parent who isn't coming. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat in the dark for a long time while the sun dropped into the Atlantic, and the room went gray and then darker still. I wasn't crying. I was thinking about a boy in a diner uniform walking home to an empty apartment, about wire hangers swinging in an open closet, about $12.40 and 3 days of pretending. And I was thinking about the man who showed up in a charcoal suit and said, "You won't beg for stability again." He kept that promise. Every single day for 18 years. He kept it in the form of schedules and textbooks and drilled scenarios, and one night in the dark when he pulled up a chair and just stayed while I fell apart. That was love, not the greeting card kind, the kind that builds something. The liquidation moved fast. The estate sold. The shares transferred. The check that was cut to the Sawyer Foundation was the largest single donation in the organization's history. The board of Black Harbor voted unanimously to retain me as CEO on a standard salary. I didn't keep a dollar of the estate, but I kept everything that mattered. I took over the directorship of the foundation. I bought 3 apartment buildings in the city and converted them into emergency housing for teenagers, kids who had nowhere to go because the person who was supposed to protect them had decided protecting them was too inconvenient. Every lease I signed, I thought of her. I thought of how badly she wanted that money and how she'd have to live the rest of her life knowing it went to fund the exact thing she'd refused to be. Her greed became someone else's shelter. Grant left her when the check never arrived. She moved to a small apartment in Ohio. I received letters occasionally, forwarded through Marvin, that I never opened. The story ends on a Tuesday night. I'm in a smaller house now, one I bought with my own salary. It doesn't sit on a cliff. It has a garden and warm lights and a kitchen that's never, not once, had a jar of pickles and nothing else. I walk to the front door, check the lock. The deadbolt is solid and cold and mine. I flip it, click. I used to lock doors because I was afraid of what was outside. Now I lock them them because I'm at peace with what's in. I turn off the hall light and walk up the stairs into the quiet. The boy who waited on the curb is gone. In his place is a man who learned from the best teacher he never asked for that the only way to survive the game is to be willing to flip the table, and the only way to win it is to make sure the table is already yours.